Hi everyone. How are you? Thank you guys so much for joining me today. So some of you may know that Sunday is International Day of the Girl, which is a day that we use to celebrate girls and women everywhere as they inspire and break boundaries and they take control of their own futures. And it's also a day to shed light on inequality and on other gender-based challenges that girls around the world face too often. And this is very important to me. I really want to make sure that young women and girls are getting an education, that they have freedom to get an education, and that they have access to education if they need. So over the past year, I've gotten involved with this organization called CARE. It's a leading humanitarian organization focused on ending global poverty by uplifting women and girls. So CARE works in 100 countries, and they ensure that girls and women everywhere are able to reach their full potential and get an education. So yesterday, I got to go to a virtual Nepal trip instead of going to Nepal since we can't travel right now. And I had a chance to talk to Gayatri Patel, who is the Director of Gender Advocacy at CARE. So I'm going to invite her now to discuss our trip that we had yesterday. Let me find her. Hi, Gayatri.
Hey Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again, and thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. So do you want to start out just by telling me a little bit about CARE's work and um, and what CARE does around the world?
Sure. Well, you gave us a good start. Um, I'm sure you've probably heard of the care package, a box of goodies that you might send to a kid at camp or a sick relative. What you might not know is that 75 years ago, CARE actually started the original care package, providing things like food and supplies to people who were impacted by World War II. So really helping the people who were fleeing the conflict and trying to survive. Um, but these days, 75 years later, our work is so much bigger and broader than delivering care packages. We work, as you said, in about 100 countries around the world, impacting about 68 million lives around the world, really trying to fight poverty and working with communities who are displaced or facing humanitarian emergencies. And at the center of all of this is social justice, really trying to get at the heart of why people are in poverty and why people are so affected by humanitarian emergencies, which is why we put so much emphasis on women and girls and really trying to empower them and bring them in on the work that we do. So, around the world, our programs are focused on building schools and education systems, or training community health workers and providing health services, or providing women with economic opportunities, or addressing gender-based violence. So we work, as you said, around the world, and it's been a really exciting journey.
And one of the things from yesterday that I really loved was hearing from Priyanka, who specifically speaks about her experience in the Tipping Point program, which is a program you guys have where they come and discuss child marriage and how harmful that can be, and the importance of staying in school, just sort of changing societal norms and helping sort of re-educate people. So can you tell us a little bit more about child marriage and its negative consequences in young girls, and how that sort of spins out, and the negative consequences long term?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even before COVID, the numbers of child marriages was staggering. There were estimates of, I think, something like 12 million girls being married every year before the age of 18. And now with COVID and all of the economic instability and the restrictions on movement and just the stress of a pandemic, that number is estimated to be so much higher. So it's not an issue that's, concentrated in one particular area of the world. It's something that's everywhere. Every country, every country, rich, poor, across religions, etc. And I think at the heart of it, it's really something that we see as a violation of girls' rights, a violation of their dignity, a form of gender-based violence. Um, and the reason it persists is there's so many reasons. And I think it would be easy to say, oh, it happens because people are poor or because they're uneducated. But it's really a lot more complex than that. Um, it really persists in communities and in contexts where, simply put, girls are just not valued, where gender inequality and harmful norms persist, where girls are given very little say in their lives, and so they end up in situations where they're married and they've had very little say in terms of whether to get married, when to get married, and who to get married to. And so, and then you have this overlay of, parents and communities having this desire to control girl sexuality and their relationships. And so there's this fear that if a girl has a relationship, even if it's a friendship with the boy, that's somehow going to be harmful to her reputation or to the family's reputation. And so parents become more motivated when they see their girls, having relationships with boys or friendships with boys, to kind of cycle them more towards child marriage. And then when you add on top of that, economic disadvantage, poor access to education, et cetera, it becomes a much more complex situation.
Right. And with COVID, and what I was learning about yesterday was specifically when you become a wife, especially at such a young age, it's within the society you're supposed to be the caretaker and cook and clean and take care of everyone and take care of the men, and that doesn't allow you any time to go to school. So when you're making this decision or being forced into it, you're really just losing out on a chance to have an education.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the tipping point program, do you want to tell me, I touched on it. Is there anything more specific that you want to say about the tipping point program and how that program works to end child marriage and how that's helping in Nepal?
Yeah, I mean, you got a great glimpse into it yesterday, and I think it's such a good example of the kind of work that CARE does around the world. We don't just, barge into communities and say, okay, we're here to save the day to stop child marriage. We really see it for the community practice that it is, and so we work with the community. And within that process, we try to really work particularly with the people who are not heard from as much. So we work with girls. We give them space to talk about their ideas and what they want out of their futures, and build the confidence to speak up for themselves and speak up within their community. But we also work with the community. We work with boys. We work with parents. We work with religious leaders and community leaders who are also part of this ecosystem of managing girls' lives, and get them to start thinking through, like, okay, what is the real impact of child marriage on our community? Is it holding us back? Are there things that we need to be thinking of differently? And what we see is when they start doing this, dialogue and these processes, they start challenging some of these norms that are underpinning child marriage. And we see girls become more confident. We see communities more willing to listen to the girls. We see boys and parents second guessing whether child marriage is the right step for them. And so there is this transformation, and it's long term. I mean, it's not something that you're going to see effects from a month into it. It's something that takes time, but it has an impact beyond just the short term efforts.
Right. Right. And from the virtual trip from yesterday, which was so informative and interesting, hearing from Priyanka, who is this girl who very kindly spoke to us about her experiences. She said that from the tipping point program that it was the tipping point for her. It was what helped her rethink what was the convention and what her sisters were doing and all of that. So it's
exactly
an incredible program that really works, and really awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, Priyanka was such a great example of the power of girls activism. I mean, she started off as, new to this program. She saw it through to the end. She now works for it. But over the course, I mean, she was describing how she gained a voice, she gained confidence in speaking, and she started organizing. She started getting together with the girls in her community and demanding change, which was something that was, you know, relatively unheard of before that. So, you know, having that sense of you can be an agent of change is something that's so critical to this work.
Yeah, and to that point, the other one of the other things I love about CARE, and thank you guys for all your donations. CARE is also really incredible because instead of sending people from other countries, they really build up and mobilize within each country that they work in, and they work in over 100 countries. They have young people like Priyanka and others come and work for the organization and speak, and then really support the community from the inside out. So it's a really remarkable sort of infrastructure that you guys built.
Yeah.
So as far as emergencies, like we're in an emergency situation right now, obviously a world emergency. Um, I know from you guys from CARE that girls are extra vulnerable during times like these. So can you tell us how that's played out, um, and why child marriage is increasing during this emergency and during other
Yeah.
emergencies?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately a reality that girls are very vulnerable during emergencies, whether they're, you know, displaced and fleeing conflict or natural disaster, or whether, you know, like right now where they're sheltering in place, that emergency and that crisis really has an impact, and it makes their, you know, pre-existing vulnerability so much worse. Um, COVID is actually a really great example of that, unfortunately. I mean, I was saying before, the previous estimates were that 12 million girls every year were getting married. Now it's, you know, they're estimating that 13 million additional child marriages will happen just as a result of COVID, 4 million just in the next 2 years. And so you see the impact of how crisis can really change dynamics and make things so much worse. And why this happens, I mean, it's child marriage it's so complex, like we were saying before, but in emergencies, it's really, you know, it's kind of this concept of marriage for a girl equals protection. So parents will see marrying their daughters off to somebody who's a little bit richer as, you know, they have more ability to protect their daughter. Or they look at the context and say, oh, we're now in a situation where my daughter is much more vulnerable to rape or sexual assault. And so they'll marry their daughter off to kind of protect their honor or protect their reputation. And so it's, you know, it's very much a struggle, and it's part of a broader context. Gender-based violence generally increases during emergencies. So you see more rape, you see more domestic violence, you see vulnerability to trafficking. So it's, you know, it's part of a big ecosystem.
And the unfortunately marrying someone and then being stuck with them under quarantine or any other kind of situation like that, you can be in a violent situation and be stuck there and unable to have the freedom to get out of it. Um,
Right.
so you're not
Exactly.
think it's a safe thing, but it's actually the complete opposite. So how is CARE currently working on the ground to solve this during this challenging time?
Yeah. I mean, so CARE works in so many of the worst humanitarian crises around the world. And our primary priority is providing life-saving services. We provide food, shelter, sanitation, et cetera, all while trying to be very conscious of supporting the women and girls in that context that are particularly vulnerable or disproportionately vulnerable. And so the work that we do, I mean, for example, we work a lot in terms of safe spaces, setting up safe spaces so that women and girls can go to get support, get services if they're in a domestic violence situation, get legal services, access education, even if it's just temporary, or skills, um, or just, you know, just have a solidarity or support system around them to keep them safe. Um, but we also, you know, speaking of women and girls in emergencies, we really try to focus on the role of women as first responders. I mean, there's always this stereotype that women are just these, you know, passive victims of what's happening, but really what in so many places women are the first responders. They're the ones who are distributing humanitarian relief services. They're delivering babies. They're delivering medical services. They're organizing their community. They're sharing information. And so really highlighting that, and highlighting the fact that despite these roles that they're playing, they're so often cut out of decision making and leadership, and their voices are quashed. And so, what tries to do is work with women's rights organizations in those communities who are doing this work on the ground to support them and bring them more into the leadership fold and amplify their voices so that they can really lead and work with their communities.
That's great. And that's one of the things I love about CARE. Really, the infrastructure building is supporting women, letting the communities grow from within, and re-educating and all that. It's an incredible thing. Um, so how can we all help? How can everyone who's watching help right now? I'm so glad to see people donating. You can obviously donate, but I know that you guys are also working on something else that can help contribute to the solution.
Yeah, I mean, well, first, thank you. Thanks for using your platform and your voice to speak up on these issues. It's incredibly important to learn about them, to understand them, and to really just be motivated to do something. One of the things that we are doing at CARE is trying to advance legislation that'll bring more attention to these issues. So we have a bill called the Safe from the Start Act, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation. So both Democrats and Republicans have supported this. And it's really intended to bring more attention to gender-based violence in humanitarian emergencies specifically. Mainly because it's so often things like rape or child marriage or domestic violence are ignored during the course and the chaos of an emergency. And so this bill is intended to bring more US government resources to this issue, to make permanent an existing program that already exists within the US government, to support organizations who are providing humanitarian assistance to prevent gender-based violence, and to, when it happens, know how to understand it and address it appropriately. Because it's so important to be able to do that work, to fill the gaps, to make sure that we're not somehow making the problem worse with some of our responses and being blind to some of the risks that are out there. And to take this program that already exists, but make it even better by working with women's rights organizations, working with women-led processes that are, so integral to this work, and just really shining a light on this, so that we're doing no harm, but also actually working to support and help the women and girls who are dealing with a lot of these issues.
Right. So people from the US can sign this petition. Uh,
Yes, please.
it will automatically generate letters from your representatives in Washington asking them to pass the Safe from the Start Act. So I'm going to put the link in my bio as soon as this is over, so you guys can click on that and sign the petition if you're in the US. Um, and do you have anything else that you want to add that I have missed?
No, I just want to thank you again, and thanks to all of your viewers. It's fantastic to see so much support, and honestly, this legislation is something that we'd really like to see passed. It's something that has a lot of support on the Hill, and something that will really make a difference. So sign the petition. It sends a letter to your representative in Congress asking them to support the legislation. Thank you so much for your donations. Thank you,
Yes, you
Alex.
guys can donate. You can follow CARE. Um, you can check their website out. And thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, Gayatri.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye.